At full release, my spillway gates drop Willow Lake 1 inch every 12 minutes. I turn the valve at 6:07 a.m. Laura Benson cut the ribbon at 10:07 a.m. 4 hours later, in front of 314 people, a county commissioner, and a regional news crew she had personally invited, she gave a 3-minute address. She thanked the county for the grant. She said the words she had been preparing for 2 years. This lake has always belonged to the community. At 10:14 a.m., the camera operator noticed the boat launch ramp. At 10:16 a.m., a woman near the waterline looked down at her feet. At 10:18 a.m., the recession was visible from one end of the park to the other. 18 inches of pale lake bed where the shoreline had been, the boat launched sitting in mud, standing water advancing toward the picnic table foundations at the eastern end, exactly as mapped in the hydrologist's site assessment, which had been in my legal binder for 8 months. 11 minutes after she cut the ribbon, 314 people stopped talking and watched the lake leave her park. I was on my porch with binoculars. 2 years earlier, a planning notice had arrived in my mailbox. 1 page, on Crestwood HOA letterhead, describing a public lakeside park built on my private shoreline using a 1991 easement that my property attorney read in a single afternoon and summarized in 4 sentences. The easement allows HOA members to walk the bank and fish in the afternoons. It does not authorize a $340,000 park. Your water management rights are absolute and explicitly protected, and the more they build before we file, the stronger the case becomes. Then he said, "Let her build." I opened a new folder on my desktop, typed the label, and went to find my camera. The morning arrives the way June mornings arrive in the Midwest Lake Country. Clear and warm before 8 o'clock, the kind of light that makes everything look like it was built to be photographed. By 9:15 a.m., cars are already parked along both sides of the access road, leading to the northern shoreline of Willow Lake. Families with folding chairs, couples with coffee thermoses, children running ahead of their parents toward the sound of water. A county parks volunteer in an orange vest is directing parking with the focused energy of someone who has been told this event is important and has decided to treat parking as the load-bearing element of the entire occasion. A banner stretched between 2 newly planted ornamental trees at the entrance to the park reads, "Willow Lake Public Recreation Area. Grand Opening. Crestwood HOA in partnership with the county." The lettering is navy blue on white, the font chosen for that particular combination of civic authority and community warmth that Laura Benson had specified to the sign printer 3 weeks ago. 314 people gather on the northern shoreline of a lake that Laura Benson does not own. The Willow Lake Public Recreation Area is, by any visual measure, a genuinely impressive piece of work. 8 months of construction have produced a 2,400 square foot open pavilion with a cedar shake roof and exposed timber framing, positioned at the center of the northern shoreline with sight lines across the full breadth of the lake. A concrete boat launch ramp descends cleanly into the water at the eastern end of the park. A quarter-mile paved walking trail runs along the bank from the pavilion to the western boundary, its surface smooth and even, bordered on the water side by a low timber rail. 42 picnic tables on concrete footings are arranged in clusters along the waterfront, some in the open sun, some beneath the shade of the mature oaks that line the upper bank. The whole thing looks like exactly what Laura has been calling it in every press release and grant application for the past 14 months. A landmark community amenity, a gift to the county, a realization of the public recreational potential that Willow Lake has always represented. The news crew from the regional ABC affiliate has set up their camera on an elevated position near the pavilion's eastern corner, the lens angled to take in both the ribbon and the lake behind it in the same frame. The camera operator has been here since 8:30 a.m. She has filmed the setup, the crowd arriving, the children running to the water's edge, the county commissioner stepping out of a black sedan at 9:45 a.m. and shaking hands with 3 HOA board members in the parking area. She has enough establishing footage for a 2-minute segment. She is waiting for the ribbon cutting. The county commissioner is a man named Robert Klein, in his late 50s, with the practiced public warmth of someone who has attended hundreds of ribbon cuttings and understands that his role is to represent the county's endorsement of the thing being opened without necessarily having read the legal basis for it. He has a 3-paragraph statement prepared. He has been told by his communications director that this is a good community interest story. Local HOA develops public lake access. County partners on beautification grant. Families get a park. He has no reason to think otherwise. He is holding his remarks, looking at the lake, and waiting for Laura. Laura Benson arrives at the ribbon at 10:02 a.m. She is 51 years old, the kind of woman who has run organizations her entire adult life and carries the particular energy of someone for whom the gap between vision and execution is primarily a management problem. She's been a Crestwood HOA board president for 6 years. She has shepherded the Willow Lake Recreation Area project from concept to completion. The planning notices, the contractor selection, the special assessment, the county grant application, the press releases, the social media campaign, the invitation list for this morning's event. She has done all of it with the focused momentum of someone who decided early on that this project was her legacy and has organized the past 2 years of her professional life around making it real. She takes her position at the ribbon with the oversized ceremonial scissors that the HOA office manager ordered from a promotional supplier in March. She looks at the crowd, 314 people, the news camera, Commissioner Klein at her right shoulder, the lake behind her, flat and silver in the morning sun, 19 acres of water that she has described in every public communication as a shared community resource and a public recreational asset. She gives a brief address, 3 minutes, prepared and delivered with the measured confidence of someone who has done this before. She thanks the county. She thanks the contractor. She thanks the HOA membership for their support through the special assessment. She describes the Willow Lake Recreation Area as the fulfillment of a promise the community has owed itself for 30 years. Public access to a public lake, developed to a standard that honors the resource and the community it serves. She does not mention Edward Harlan. She does not mention that the lake is privately owned. She does not mention that the 1991 easement she has been citing as the legal basis for the project grants limited recreational access and explicitly prohibits permanent construction. She raises the scissors at 10:06 a.m. The crowd stirs forward. The camera operator steadies her frame. Commissioner Klein smiles for the lens. A child in a red jacket near the water's edge turns toward the sound of the crowd and starts clapping without quite knowing why. Laura cuts the ribbon at 10:07 a.m. The crowd applauds. Commissioner Klein shakes Laura's hand. 2 board members embrace near the pavilion entrance. The camera operator holds the shot. Ribbon halves falling, crowd moving forward, the lake blue and still in the background. Then she begins to track the crowd as they spread across the park. Children run toward the water immediately. A group of elderly residents make their way to the picnic tables nearest the pavilion. A family with a kayak strapped to their car roof moves toward the boat launch with the practical purpose of people who have been waiting for this ramp since the first social media post announced the opening date. The volunteer in the orange vest is now managing foot traffic near the trail entrance. The county parks representative is speaking with an HOA board member near the pavilion. Commissioner Klein is moving through the crowd, shaking hands, accepting congratulations as if the park were partially his, which is how ribbon cuttings work. The official presence absorbs a portion of the credit by proximity. At 10:14 a.m., the camera operator notices something. She notices it the way you notice something that is wrong before you have identified what is wrong about it. A visual shift at the edge of the frame, a change in the geometry of the lake's relationship to the shore. She adjusts her angle slightly and looks at the boat launch ramp. The water level at the base of the ramp is lower than it was 20 minutes ago. Not dramatically, not in a way that most people would catch immediately, but she's been looking at this lake for 90 minutes this morning, and she knows what it looked like when she arrived, and does not look the same now. She holds the camera on the ramp and watches. At 10:16 a.m., a woman standing near the water's edge at the center of the northern shoreline looks down at her feet. She has been standing in the same spot for 10 minutes talking to a friend, and she notices that the water line is no longer where it was when she arrived. The observation begins to move through the crowd. At 10:18 a.m., 11 minutes after the ribbon cutting, the recession is unmistakable. The water line is pulling back from the northern shore in a continuous, visible movement. The pale lake bed emerging from beneath the surface in a widening band that extends the full length of the park's waterfront. The boat launch ramp, designed and poured to meet the lake at a specific grade, is now meeting at 18 inches lower than intended. The lower half of the ramp sitting on wet mud, the family with the kayak standing at the top of it. Looking at the exposure below, with expressions moving through confusion toward something more complicated. The 3 picnic tables nearest the eastern shore, the ones positioned closest to the natural outflow gradient, have water moving toward their concrete footings from the redirected flow pattern that the dam's full release position produces. Exactly as documented in the water rights assessment, sitting in Edward Harlan's legal binder 300 yards to the south. The crowd has stopped moving. The conversations have stopped. 314 people are standing in various positions across a brand new lakeside park and watching the lake leave. The camera operator has been filming the recession for 4 minutes. She has not put the camera down. She understands, with the instinct of someone who has covered local news for 11 years, that she is filming the story rather than the setup for the story she expected to tell. Commissioner Klein has stopped speaking mid-sentence in a conversation with a board member. He is looking at the lake with the careful, assessing expression of a public official trying to determine whether what he is observing is an emergency, an embarrassment, or both. Laura is standing at the pavilion entrance with the ceremonial scissors still in her right hand. She is looking at the water. Her expression has traveled in 11 minutes from the satisfied confidence of a woman at the apex of a 2-year project to something considerably more difficult to describe. The particular expression of someone watching a situation move in a direction they did not plan for and cannot yet calculate the end of. 300 yards to the south, behind a locked gate marked with a single laminated sign, "Private Property, Edward Harlan, Owner." The dam control house sits quiet in the morning sun. The primary spillway gates have been at full release position since 6:07 a.m., 4 hours and 11 minutes ago, when Edward Harlan inserted his key, turned the release valve, listened to the mechanism engage, and walked back up the gravel path to his porch. He is sitting there now with his binoculars raised, watching the crowd, watching the lake. Beside him on the porch table sits a thermos of coffee and a legal binder 4 inches thick, 14 months of documentation. Certified surveys, easement analysis, water rights assessments, permit compliance failures. In every public statement Laura Benson has made about a lake she does not own and a park she had no legal right to build. The binder is not there because Edward needs to consult it this morning. It is there because it represents the distance between what Laura built and what she was permitted to build, and Edward finds it useful to have that distance close at hand on a morning like this one. He watches through the binoculars as the water line continues its withdrawal. He watches the camera operator track the recession. He watches Commissioner Klein's expression change. He watches Laura turn from the pavilion toward the lake and stand very still with the scissors in her hand. He has been waiting for this moment for 2 years. He has waited with the patience of a retired civil engineer who understands that a structure under improper load does not announce its failure in advance. It simply reaches the point where the load exceeds the capacity, and then it fails. And the failure is complete and visible and not reversible by wishing it had been built differently. He has waited through the planning notice, through the construction, through 14 months of press releases and grant applications and social media posts, and a county commissioner's office endorsement of a project built on a foundation that Michael Grant identified as legally indefensible within 24 hours of reading a 3-page document from 1991. He has waded through the invitations going out to 314 people. He has waded through the news crew setting up their camera. He has waded through the banner and the orange-vested parking volunteer and the ceremonial scissors and 3 paragraphs about public lakes and community legacies and 30 years of deferred promise. He has waded through the ribbon cutting. And then, at 6:07 a.m. on a clear June Saturday, for hours before Laura raised the scissors, he walked down the gravel path and opened the gates. He pours coffee from the thermos and watches the lake continue to recede in the morning light. Somewhere in the crowd, a child is asking a parent why the water is going away. The parent does not have an answer. Most of the 314 people at the Willow Lake Public Recreation Area do not have an answer yet. They will, Edward thinks, soon enough. He takes a sip of coffee and watches the camera operator hold her frame on the retreating waterline, steady and patient, waiting for the story to finish telling itself. 2 years before the ribbon cutting, on a Wednesday morning in late June, Edward Harlan walks to his mailbox at the end of the gravel driveway and finds 3 items inside: a water quality report from the County Watershed Authority, a parts catalog from an equipment supplier he ordered from twice a decade, and a single-page document on Crestwood HOA letterhead. He reads the HOA notice standing at the mailbox the way he reads most things, completely from the first word to the last, without skimming, because 30 years as a civil engineer trained him to understand that the sentence you skip is almost always the sentence that matters. The notice is titled Community Development Planning Notice, Willow Lake Public Recreation Area Phase 1. It describes a proposed public recreation development on the northern shoreline of Willow Lake, a pavilion, a boat launch, a walking trail, and picnic facilities. It cites a 1991 public access easement as the legal basis for the project. It provides a construction timeline beginning the following spring. It is signed at the bottom by Laura Benson, Board President, Crestwood Lake Community HOA. Edward reads it twice. Then he carries it inside, sets it on the kitchen table, and sits down with it and his coffee and the particular focused attention of a man who has spent his career identifying where the load-bearing assumptions in a document are buried and what happens when those assumptions are wrong. He notes what the notice says. The HOA has approved a public recreation development. The 1991 easement provides the legal basis. Construction will begin in spring. The project will provide the community with a premier lakeside recreational facility. Then he notes, with considerably more care, what the notice does not say. It does not cite a construction permit of any kind. No building permit, no shoreline disturbance permit, no water body impact authorization, no state environmental agency notification for work at the edge of a private water body. It does not reference any water management agreement with the dam owner. It does not contain any acknowledgement that Willow Lake is privately owned, that the lake bed belongs to Edward Harlan by recorded deed, that the dam and its operational rights are private property, or that the person who controls the water level of the proposed lakeside park is a 62-year-old retired engineer living 300 yards to the south who has not been consulted, informed, or asked for consent in any provision of the document he is holding. It does not mention Edward Harlan at all. Edward sets the notice down and looks out the kitchen window toward the lake. The northern shoreline is visible through the tree line at the end of the property. Undeveloped, tree-lined, the bank sloping gently to the water's edge, the way it has since he purchased the property in 1998. He bought Willow Lake from a conservation trust that had held it since the late 1980s. 19 acres of private lake, the surrounding buffer land, and the dam structure at the southern end with all operational rights attached to the deed. The trust had been careful stewards. They had, in 1991, granted a limited public access easement to the County Parks Department for non-motorized recreational use of the shoreline during daylight hours, a reasonable gesture from a conservation organization that wanted the public to enjoy the resource without compromising the private ownership structure. When Edward purchased the property 7 years later, that easement was disclosed in the title report as a recreational use easement with standard seasonal access provisions, and he had accepted it as a reasonable encumbrance. People walking the bank and fishing in the afternoons had never troubled him. What the planning notice was describing was not people walking the bank and fishing in the afternoons. He calls Michael Grant at 2:30 that afternoon. Michael is a property rights attorney who has practiced in the Lake Country for 23 years, handling easement disputes, repairing boundary conflicts, dam ownership matters, and the particular category of case that arises when a community organization mistakes administrative custody of a document for legal authority over the property the document describes. He is methodical, unhurried, and has the professional habit of reading every document in a case before forming any opinion about any of them, a habit that serves him well in easement matters, where the entire outcome frequently depends on 3 sentences on page 2 of a 30-year-old filing that someone on the other side of the dispute has either not read or has decided to read selectively. Edward reads him the notice over the phone. Michael listens without interrupting. When Edward finishes, Michael asks one question. Has he ever read the full text of the 1991 easement document himself? Not just the summary in the title report. Edward tells him no. Michael tells him he will have it by tomorrow afternoon. He calls the county recorder's office the following morning and requests a certified copy of the 1991 easement by grantor name and recording date. He has it on his desk by noon and reads it that afternoon in the complete, sequential manner of a man who understands that a document's meaning lives in its full text, not in its title or its summary. The easement is 3 pages. Page 1 establishes the parties: the Conservation Trust as grantor, the County Parks Department as grantee, and the legal description of the easement area. The shoreline margin of Willow Lake within 20 feet of the high water mark along the northern and eastern banks. Page 2 sets out the grant in specific terms. The county and its designees are granted the right to use the easement area for public non-motorized recreational purposes: walking, fishing, swimming, non-motorized watercraft, during daylight hours between April 1st and November 30th of each calendar year. The grant language is followed by a limiting clause that Michael reads twice. The foregoing recreational rights shall constitute the complete and exclusive extent of this grant and shall not be construed to include or imply any right of construction, permanent installation, exclusive occupation, commercial use, or infrastructure development of any kind within the easement area or the adjacent water body. Michael underlines the phrase complete and exclusive extent of this grant. Page 3 contains the ownership preservation clause, the provision that the Conservation Trust attorney had apparently insisted upon with the specificity of someone who had seen recreational easements weaponized before and wanted to make it impossible to repeat the process with this one. The clause reads, all use of the easement area shall remain at all times subordinate to and consistent with the property owner's rights of ownership and water management, including without limitation the sole and unrestricted right to operate any dam, gate, weir, or water control structure on the property at the owner's complete discretion without notice to or consent from the grantee or any member of the public using the easement area. And no easement use shall give rise to any claim against the property owner for the consequences of such operation. Michael underlines the entire paragraph. Page 3 also contains a transfer provision, the clause that explains how the HOA came to believe it held any authority over the easement at all. It states that the county may assign administrative oversight of the easement to a community organization in the event the county dissolves its direct maintenance responsibility, subject to the condition that any such assignment transfers only administrative functions and does not expand, modify, or augment the rights granted in the original easement. Michael notes the phrase administrative functions only. He calls Edward the following afternoon. He begins with the easement grant. The 1991 document grants the right to walk, fish, and paddle on the shoreline during daylight hours in the warm months. That is the complete and exclusive extent of the grant. The document says so explicitly in those words. It grants no right of construction, no right to install permanent infrastructure of any kind, no right to develop a pavilion, a boat launch, a paved walking trail, or a picnic facility. The limiting clause is not ambiguous. It is not implied. It is written directly into the grant definition as an explicit exclusion placed there by a grantor who clearly understood that recreational easement language can be stretched if you do not specifically prevent the stretching. He moves to the transfer provision. When the county dissolved its parks maintenance program in 2003 and transferred administrative oversight to the Crestwood HOA, what transferred was administrative function, the ability to coordinate public access, post seasonal notices, manage the shoreline's day-to-day use. What did not transfer was any expanded authority, any construction right, any development permission. The HOA received a clipboard with a form on it. It did not receive a deed. It did not receive a development right. It did not receive ownership of anything. He moves to the Ownership Preservation Clause. Edward's Water Management Authority, his right to operate the dam gates at his discretion, at any level, at any time, for any reason, without notice or consent, is explicitly protected and declared superior to any easement use. No recreational user, no administrative designee, no HOA board president with a press release and a county grant application has any legal basis to challenge, restrict, or seek damages for the exercise of that authority. Michael's summary is 4 sentences, delivered in the flat, even register of a professional who has reached a conclusion through analysis rather than advocacy. The easement allows members of the public to walk along the northern shoreline and fish in the afternoons between April and November. It does not authorize a $340,000 lakeside park with a pavilion, a boat launch, 42 picnic tables, and a ribbon-cutting ceremony attended by a county commissioner and a television news crew. Edward's right to open the dam gates at his sole discretion is explicitly preserved and cannot be challenged on the basis of the effect on the shoreline. And the HOA's administrative oversight of the easement gives it exactly the authority the transfer provision says it transferred, which is administrative function, not ownership, not development rights, and not the ability to represent a private lake to a county grant office as a public recreational asset. Edward sits with this for a moment. He asks Michael what they should do, whether to send a legal notice to the HOA before construction begins, whether to contact the county to correct the record on the easement, whether to file for an injunction. Michael tells him to do none of those things. Edward asks him to explain. Michael tells him what he has told clients in similar situations before, that a legal notice sent before construction give the other side the opportunity to modify, delay, and restructure the project in ways that complicate the legal picture. An injunction hearing puts the matter before a judge while the violation is still theoretical. And correcting the record with the county before Laura files her grant application means the grant application never happens, which removes a significant piece of what Michael is already thinking about in terms of the full legal exposure the HOA is building toward. Let her file the grant application, Michael says. Let her build the park. Let her plan the grand opening. Invite the commissioner. Invite the news crew and cut the ribbon. He pauses. Then open the gates. Edward is quiet for a moment. He looks out the window at the northern shoreline, empty, tree-lined, the bank undisturbed in the afternoon light. How long, he asks. Construction will take most of next year, Michael says. Grand opening probably the following summer. 14 months, give or take. Edward nods at the phone. He ends the call, walks to the filing cabinet in his study, and opens the bottom drawer. Inside is a log book, dark green cover, his name written on the spine in black marker, in which he has recorded every gate operation, every water level measurement, every maintenance note, and seasonal drawdown since he took ownership of the dam in 1998. 19 years of entries in the precise, consistent hand of an engineer who keeps records, because records are how you establish what happened, when it happened, and under whose authority. He carries the log book to the kitchen table. He opens it to the first blank page after the most recent entry. He uncaps his pen. He writes today's date at the top of the page. Beneath it, in the same careful hand he has used for 19 years, he writes, Planning notice received from Crestwood HOA. Proposed public recreation development, northern shoreline, citing 1991 easement. Easement reviewed by Michael Grant. Construction rights not granted. Water Management Authority confirmed unaffected. Documentation to begin. No contact with HOA. He caps the pen. He closes the log book. He looks at the lake through the kitchen window for a long moment. 19 acres of private water sitting in the afternoon light, flat and silver. Entirely unaware of the 2 years of planning and building and grant applications and press releases and invitation lists that are about to be organized around it. Then he goes to find his camera. Construction begins on the second Monday of March, arriving with the particular certainty of something that has been planned long enough to feel inevitable to the people executing it. Edward hears the equipment at 7:20 a.m., The low diesel register of a tracked excavator moving along the northern access corridor, followed by the backup warning of a grading truck reversing toward the shoreline. He is at the kitchen window with his coffee when the sounds reach him across the lake, and he sets the cup down, picks up the camera from the shelf beside the back door, and walks to the porch. The landscape contractor the HOA has retained works with the efficient, impersonal momentum of a firm that has built outdoor amenity spaces across the lake country for 15 years and knows the sequence of operations by heart. The first week is clearing. The northern shoreline vegetation comes down methodically, the mature sedges and shoreline shrubs graded back to expose the bank from the water's edge to the upper tree line. Edward photographs every stage of it. He photographs the first excavator bite into the lake bed margin, the moment the protected shoreline ecology breaks under the bucket with the same quiet finality he had seen in a dozen construction sites over his engineering career. He photographs the grading trucks leveling the bank. He photographs the survey stakes driven into the ground at the boat launch position, stakes that his own surveyor will later confirm sit entirely outside the easement boundary on Edward's fee-simple lake bed, where no easement provision of any kind applies. He notes the dates and times in his log book each evening. The entries are brief, precise, the language of an engineer's field record rather than a narrative. Equipment types, work locations, estimated disturbed area, photographs taken. He has been keeping records in this logbook for 19 years. He adds the construction documentation to the same volume with the same hand, treating the HOA's part project as one more thing happening on his property that requires accurate counting. Margaret Ellis notices the boat launch ramp position in the third week. Margaret lives on the eastern shore of Willow Lake, 2 properties north of Edwards Dam Access Road. She is 67, retired after 24 years as a county planning officer. The kind of career that ends not because the work becomes less interesting, but because the body eventually decides that 30 years of reading permit applications, site plans, and environmental impact assessments has earned a rest. She has been watching the northern shore construction with the professional unease of someone who spent 2 decades reviewing exactly this kind of project and has a calibrated sense of when the paperwork matches the work and when it does not. She calls Edward on a Tuesday morning in the 4th week of construction. The boat launch ramp, she says without preamble. They've poured the footing on the wrong side of the line. Edward asks what she means. She tells him she has been cross-referencing the ramp position against the county plat records she pulled from the recorder's office the previous week. The 1991 easement boundary runs along the shoreline at a specific recorded distance from the high water mark. The ramp footing, based on her measurement from the county plat, sits south of that boundary, outside the easement area, entirely on the lake bed that Edward owns in fee simple with no encumbrance. The HOA's contractor has poured a permanent concrete structure on private property where the HOA holds no right of any kind. Not a recreational right, not a development right, not any right at all. Edward is quiet for a moment. Margaret asks if he wants her to document it formally. He tells her yes, photographs, measurements, a written assessment, everything she would produce in her former professional capacity. He tells her Michael Grant will want in the format that holds up under legal scrutiny. She tells him she will have something prepared within the week. Her tone carries the particular settled quality of a woman who spent 24 years writing permit compliance assessments and considers this one, if anything, more straightforward than most. She documents the ramp position with a surveyor's precision. Photographs from 4 angles, a hand measurement referenced against the county plat boundary markers, a written assessment that identifies the encroachment by distance and legal land description, and confirms that the structure sits entirely on Edward's fee simple property. She identifies in the same assessment that no construction permit has been filed with the county for the ramp, the pavilion, the trail paving, or the picnic table footings. She checked the county permit database herself 3 times on 3 separate days and found nothing. No building permit, no shoreline disturbance permit, no water body impact notification for the concrete poured directly into Edwards Lake bed. No state environmental agency filing for work affecting a private water body. Nothing. She sends the assessment to Edward in a manila envelope with her former professional title typed beneath her signature. Margaret Ellis, County Planning Officer, retired, licensed land use reviewer. The credentials are not there for vanity. They are there because Michael will need them when the assessment becomes an exhibit. Construction continues through spring and into summer. By June, the pavilion framing is complete. The cedar posts and exposed timber beams of a 2,400 square foot open structure taking shape against the northern tree line with a clean, appealing look of well-built outdoor architecture. The concrete boat launch ramp is finished and cured, descending into Edwards Lake at a grade designed for easy kayak and canoe deployment. The quarter-mile walking trail is paved along the eastern bank, its surface smooth and even, bordered by a low timber rail on the waterside. The picnic tables arrive in July on a flatbed truck, 42 of them, each bolted to a pre-poured concrete footing, arranged in clusters along the waterfront with the considered spacing of a landscape plan executed at commercial scale. Edward photographs all of it, every framing stage, every paving pass, every picnic table installation. He photographs the electrical conduit run to the pavilion. No permit for that either, Margaret confirms after a second database check. He photographs the HOA's signage going up along the trail, Willow Lake Public Recreation Area, a Crestwood HOA community project. He photographs the dedication plaque mounted at the pavilion entrance, bearing Laura Benson's name and the words "Developed for the Community, 2024. He adds every photograph to the file and makes the corresponding entry in his logbook. While the park takes physical shape on the northern shore, Laura is building a different kind of structure, a public narrative about what the park is and who it belongs to, assembled from press releases, grant applications, social media posts. And the particular confidence of someone who has repeated a version of the truth often enough that the repetition has begun to function as verification. In February, before construction begins, Laura submits a grant application to the County Beautification Fund on behalf of Crestwood HOA. The application requests $45,000 toward the Willow Lake Public Recreation Area project. In the project description field, she writes, "A public waterfront park developed on publicly accessible lake property, providing county residents with premier outdoor recreational facilities, including pavilion, boat launch, walking trail, and picnic areas." In the ownership status field, she writes, "Public recreational easement administered by Crestwood HOA." She does not write privately owned lake, deed held by Edward Harlan. She does not write easement explicitly prohibits permanent construction. She does not write any of the things that Michael Grant identified within 24 hours of reading the 1991 document. The county awards the grant in March, the same week construction begins. Michael documents the grant application and the award. He adds both to the file. In April, Laura submits a press release to the regional newspaper. The headline reads, "Crestwood HOA transforms Willow Lake into premier county recreation destination." The body of the release describes the HOA as stewards of Willow Lake's public recreational heritage, developing a resource that has been available to the community in name only for 3 decades into a fully realized waterfront park. It quotes Laura directly, "This lake has always belonged to the community. We're simply making that real." The release does not mention Edward. It does not mention private ownership. It does not mention that the easement the HOA administers grants recreational access and explicitly denies construction rights. The newspaper runs the release with a photograph of the pavilion framing. Michael adds the article to the file. In May, Laura launches a social media campaign targeting the broader county community beyond the HOA membership. The campaign frames the grand opening as a county-wide event, a public park opening on a public lake, free to all county residents, a gift from the Crestwood community to the region. The posts use the phrase, "our lake," 11 times across 14 updates. They use public water 6 times. They use community-owned shoreline 4 times. None of these phrases are legally accurate. All of them are documented by Michael's office, printed, dated, and added to the file as the particular category of evidence that a misrepresentation case is built on. Not a single false statement, but a sustained, deliberate pattern of public communication designed to establish a factual premise that the underlying documents directly contradict. By June, Laura has secured the commissioner's attendance at the grand opening. By the time she contacts the regional ABC affiliate in late May to pitch the story, local HOA transforms historic lake into public park, grand opening, county commissioner attending, family event. The news producer accepts it as a straightforward community interest segment and assigns a camera crew. The segment is scheduled to run on the Saturday evening broadcast following the opening. Michael documents the media outreach. He notes the date the news crew is confirmed. He adds it to the file beside the grant application, the press releases, the social media archive, and the 47 pages of complaint narrative, certified survey, water rights assessment, permit compliance failure documentation, and legal analysis that he has been assembling in parallel with every public statement Laura makes. In the third week of June, with the park complete and the grand opening 6 days away, Michael calls Edward and tells him the file is ready. Edward asks how thick it is. Michael tells him 4 inches. Edward is quiet for a moment. He looks out at the northern shoreline, the finished pavilion visible through the tree line, the boat launch gleaming at the water's edge, 42 picnic tables arranged in the afternoon light with the settled permanence of things that have been placed somewhere and expect to stay. Everything we need? He asks. Everything, Michael says. The trespass survey from Jonathan Reed is certified. Margaret's permit assessment is signed and credentialed. The water rights analysis is complete. We have 14 months of construction photographs, the grant application with its misrepresentations to the county, every press release, every social media post. He pauses, and the process server is confirmed for Saturday morning. He will be at the northern shoreline by 10:30 a.m. Edward looks at the lake. Let her cut the ribbon, Michael says. Let the camera roll. Let the commissioner shake her hand. He asks Edward if he is ready. Edward tells him he has been ready since the day he turned to a fresh page in the logbook and wrote the date. He ends the call and goes to check the gate mechanism. While Laura Benson was building a park on the northern shoreline of Willow Lake, Michael Grant was building something that would outlast it. He began the same week the planning notice arrived in Edward's mailbox. Not with a filing, not with a letter to the HOA, not with any outward action that Laura would ever see or hear about during the 14 months of construction and celebration that followed. He began with a phone call to a licensed surveyor named Jonathan Reed, one of 2 surveyors in the county whose field methodology and certification credentials Michael trusted for litigation-grade work, and a specific instruction. He needed a full boundary and easement survey of the Willow Lake property, conducted in stages as construction progressed, so that the final certified plat would reflect the completed development in every detail rather than the empty shoreline it started on. Jonathan understood what that meant. He had produced litigation support surveys for Michael before. The kind of work with a measurement standard is not general practice but courtroom admissibility, where every datum reference, every monument tie, every margin of error notation exists not for the surveyor's file, but for the opposing counsel who will eventually try to find a flaw in it. He asked Michael when he needed the first field visit. Michael told him as soon as the boat launch footing was poured. Margaret had already identified the ramp position as a boundary problem in the 4th week of construction. Her hand measurement and county plat cross-reference had flagged it with the practiced accuracy of 24 years in county planning. But Margaret's assessment, credentialed and signed as it was a professional opinion. What Michael needed was a certified plat, a legal document produced by a licensed surveyor under seal, with field measurements tied to recorded monuments and defensible to the sub-inch precision that a trespass claim requires when the other side's attorney looks for room to argue. Jonathan conducts his first field visit in April, working from a 1991 easement document, Edward's property deed, and the county recorder plat that establishes the boundary lines with legal precision. He sets up his total station at the Southern Reference Monument and begins working north along the recorded easement boundary, measuring the position of every construction element the HOA's contractor has placed on the ground relative to that line. The boat launch ramp footing sits 4 feet and 7 inches outside the easement boundary, not at the edge of it, not in a zone of reasonable interpretation. 4 feet and 7 inches on the wrong side of a recorded line, sitting on Edward Harlan's fee simple lake bed, where no easement provision of any kind exists, and where the HOA holds no right. Not a recreational right, not an access right, not a temporary construction right, not any right at all. Jonathan photographs the measurement setup from 3 positions, records the coordinate data in his field notes, and marks the position on the preliminary plat with the notation, direct trespass, fee simple property of Edward Harlan. No easement coverage. He returns in June when the pavilion foundation is complete, in August when the trail paving is finished, and in September when the last picnic table footing is poured. Each visit adds a new layer of certified measurement to the developing plat. Every permanent structure mapped against the easement boundary with the same sub-inch precision. Every encroachment documented by type, dimension, and legal land description. The walking trail paving runs within the easement area for its full quarter-mile length, but constitutes permanent construction on ground where the easement's limiting clause explicitly prohibits any permanent installation. The 42 picnic table footings are distributed across both the easement area and, in 11 cases, the fee simple property outside it. The pavilion foundation sits within the easement boundary, but is a 2,400 square foot permanent structure on ground where the grant document says in plain language that permanent structures are not permitted. The final certified plat, completed in the second week of October, is a document of considerable precision and considerable legal consequence. It maps every element of the Willow Lake Recreation Area against the recorded property boundaries in a single illustrated instrument. The boat launch ramp and direct trespass on Edward's fee simple land, the pavilion and easement misuse, the trail and picnic facilities distributed across both categories of violation. And it carries Jonathan Reed's professional seal, his license number, and his signature on a certification that the measurements are accurate to the standards required for legal proceedings. Michael adds it to the file. The water rights assessment comes next. Michael retains a water rights specialist, a consultant named Dr. Thomas Whitaker, who has worked with private dam owners, municipal water authorities, and lake country property holders across the region for 18 years, and whose written assessments have been qualified as expert evidence in state civil court on 9 separate occasions. Michael gives him the dam deed, the 1991 easement document, Edward's 19-year gate operational logbook, and a detailed description of the grand opening scenario. Specifically, what the shoreline park looks like at various gate positions, and what legal authority Edward has to operate those positions without notice to or consent from the HOA or any member of the public using the easement area. Dr. Whitaker's report runs 22 pages. Its core conclusions are unambiguous. Edward Harlan's right to manage the water level of Willow Lake is a property right attached to the dam deed by virtue of the dam ownership itself. It is inseparable from ownership of the structure. It predates the 1991 easement, and it is explicitly preserved by the ownership clause on page 3 of that easement, which Michael had underlined on his first reading and which Dr. Whitaker quotes in full on page 4 of his report. The clause's language, sole and unrestricted right to operate any dam, gate, weir, or water control structure on the property at the owner's complete discretion without notice to or consent from the grantee or any member of the public, is dar. Whitaker writes, among the most comprehensive water management preservation clauses he has encountered in 18 years of reviewing lake property documents. It leaves no interpretive room. It grants no basis for a challenge. It means exactly what it says. The report's appendix addresses the grand opening scenario directly, with the clinical precision of an engineer working from documented gate specifications and field hydrology. At full release position, Edwards spillway gates discharge at a rate that lowers Willow Lake approximately 1 inch every 12 minutes under average late June water table conditions. At that rate, a 4-hour pre-opening gate operation beginning at 6 a.m. before a 10 o'clock ribbon cutting produces a lake level drop of approximately 18 to 20 inches by the time the ribbon is cut. The shoreline recession at that drop level, illustrated on a site map attached as Exhibit B of the report, shows the boat launch ramp sitting on exposed mud, the lower picnic table area partially flooded by redirected outflow, and the walking trail's eastern section bordered by a reseeded water line on one side. The illustration is precise, labeled, and entirely consistent with what a retired civil engineer opening his own gates at 6:07 a.m. on a June Saturday would produce. Michael adds the report to the file. Margaret's permit assessment arrives in a sealed envelope in November. 7 pages, single-spaced, signed under her professional credentials, and organized in the systematic format of a county planning compliance review. She has checked the county permit database 4 times over the course of the construction period, at intervals timed to capture any permit application filed after construction began. Her finding is consistent across all 4 checks. No building permit for the pavilion, no shoreline disturbance permit for the bank grading, no water body impact authorization for the concrete poured into Edwards Lake bed. No state environmental agency notification for construction affecting a private water body. No electrical permit for the conduit run to the pavilion. 7 categories of required permits across the full scope of the project, and not a single one filed in the county system at any point during construction. Her final line reads, "In 24 years of county planning review, I have not encountered a construction project of this scale, cost, and permanence with a more complete absence of permit compliance." Michael adds the assessment to the file. Through all of it, Jonathan Reed's survey work, Dr. Whitaker's water rights analysis, Margaret's permit documentation, the 14 months of Edwards' construction photographs, Michael files nothing with any court. He sends no letters to Laura. He does not attend HOA public meetings. He does not contact the county commissioner's office to correct the record on the grant application. He does not reach out to the news affiliate to provide context for the community interest segment that Laura's press outreach has already planted. He builds the record in complete silence. The silence is deliberate, calculated, and specific to the strategy that a certain kind of legal case requires. The strategy where the other side's confidence, unchallenged for long enough, drives them toward the single moment of maximum exposure, the moment where everything they have built is most visible and most publicly committed, the moment where a process server walking through a crowd with a 47-page complaint produces the most comprehensive and irreversible legal and reputational consequence available. In the 3rd week of June, 6 days before the grand opening, Michael calls Edward and tells him the file is complete. "Everything is in order," he says. "The trespass survey is certified and sealed. Dr. Whitaker's water rights assessment is signed. Margaret's permit analysis is credentialed. We have 14 months of construction photographs, every press release, the full grant application with its misrepresentations to the county, and the social media archive." He pauses. 47 pages of complaint with 11 exhibits. The process server is confirmed for Saturday. He'll be in the crowd by 10:15. Edward asks about the timing of the gate operation. Michael tells him to open the gates at 6 a.m. At full release, with 4 hours of drawdown before the ribbon cutting, the water level at the boat launch will be visible to anyone standing at the northern shore within 15 minutes of the ceremony ending. He has confirmed the rate of recession against Dr. Whitaker's site map. The timing is precise. Edward asks if there is anything left to prepare. Michael tells him there is not. The record is complete, the filing is ready, the process server is confirmed, and the gate mechanism has been maintained and tested. Everything that can be done has been done. He tells Edward one more thing. When the lake starts dropping, he says Robert Klein is going to look at Laura, and Laura is going to look at the lake. And neither of them is going to know what to say because neither of them has read the 3-page document that explains exactly why it is happening. Edward looks out at the northern shoreline through the evening window. The pavilion is lit from inside by work lights, the contractor doing final finishing work before the opening. The boat launch gleams at the water's edge. The picnic tables sit in their rows in the fading light. And the news camera? Edward asks. "We'll be running," Michael says. Edward nods at the phone. "All right," he says. Saturday morning. He ends the call, walks to the kitchen table, and opens the logbook to the most recent page. He picks up his pen and writes the date of the conversation, the content of the call, and a single final notation in the margin beside it. Gates, 6 a.m. Saturday. He caps the pen, closes the logbook, and goes to bed at a reasonable hour. Edward wakes at 5:30 a.m. on the Saturday of the grand opening without an alarm. He has slept the way he sleeps before any significant operational day, completely without interruption, in the manner of a man who has done his preparation and has nothing left to do before morning except be rested for it. He makes coffee at the kitchen counter, fills his thermos, and carries his logbook to the table. He opens it to the page marked with a ribbon he has used as a bookmark since 1998 and writes the date at the top in the same hand he has used for every entry across 19 years of seasonal gate records. Beneath the date, he writes, Grand Opening, Northern Shore Crestwood HOA, Willow Lake Recreation Area. Gate Operation, Full Release, 6 a.m. Expected Drawdown at ribbon cutting 18 to 20 inches per Dr. Whitaker's model. Process server confirmed 10:15 a.m. Position filing confirmed. He caps the pen, closes the logbook, and drinks his coffee at the window. The lake is dark at this hour, the pre-dawn surface absorbing the faint light rather than reflecting it. The northern shoreline invisible across the water except for the silhouette of the pavilion roof against the sky. He can see the shape of it clearly enough, the cedar shake outline, the open timber framing, the flag the HOA office manager had the contractor install at the eastern corner of the roof, chosen in the same navy and white as the entrance banner. It is a well-built pavilion. He has photographed every stage of its construction and documented every permit it should have pulled and did not. It is a well-built structure on property it has no legal right to occupy, and it has looked like a community achievement for 14 months. And this morning, that gap between appearance and legal reality is going to become visible to 314 people and a news camera simultaneously. He picks up the thermos and walks out the back door at 5:58 a.m. The gravel path to the dam control house runs south along the edge of his property through the cedar break that screens the control structure from the main house. He has walked it so many times that his boots find the path without any particular navigation from him. In daylight, in the dark, in the middle of the night during the spring flood management seasons when the water table demands attention at inconvenient hours. He walks it now in the gray pre-dawn quiet, the thermos in his left hand, his keys already in his right. He reaches the control house at 6:02 a.m. He unlocks the door and steps inside. The gate mechanism occupies the center of the concrete structure. The same hydraulic panel he serviced in March, confirmed operable in April. Checked again last Tuesday with the specificity of a man who understands that the single most important mechanical operation of a 14-month legal strategy needs to work correctly on the morning it is required to work. Every valve position is where he left it. Every gauge is reading within normal range. The primary spillway gate is in its standard summer management position. Partial release, lake level maintained at seasonal operating height. He sets the thermos on the shelf. He looks at the gate control for a moment, not hesitating, simply the brief pause of a person who has made a decision and is acknowledging it before executing it. He turns the primary spillway release valve to the full open position at 6:07 a.m. The mechanism engages with the low hydraulic groan he has heard hundreds of times, the gate lifting, the discharge chamber opening. The sound of the water below the dam, changing register as the spillway accepts its full capacity, and the lake begins quietly and with the unhurried certainty of water finding the path of least resistance to move south. He stands in the control house for 30 seconds, listening to the change in the water's sound. Then he picks up the thermos, steps outside, locks the door, and walks back up the gravel path to his house. He sits on the porch. He raises the binoculars. He pours coffee from the thermos. He waits. By 7:30 a.m., the lake has dropped 4 inches, barely visible from his porch, but there a thin, pale margin of exposed lake bed appearing along the southern end of the northern shore, the rock and sediment below the waterline emerging into the morning air with the slow, methodical certainty of the hydrological process Dr. Whitaker had modeled in clinical detail 8 months earlier. By 8:15 a.m., the drop is 8 inches, and the band of exposed lake bed has extended along the full northern shoreline. Narrow, but continuous, the familiar summer waterline replaced by a pale geological record of where the water used to be. By 9 a.m., cars are filling the access road. Edward watches through the binoculars as the crowd assembles across the lake. He watches the orange-vested parking volunteer direct traffic with the focused authority of someone whose job has expanded to fill the morning. He watches the news crew van park at the upper lot and the camera operator begin unloading equipment. He watches Commissioner Klein's black sedan pull into the reserved space near the pavilion entrance at 9:44 a.m., and the commissioner step out with the unhurried confidence of a man who has attended enough ribbon cuttings to know the schedule will hold. He watches Laura. She is moving through the crowd from 9:30 onward with the kinetic, purposeful energy of a woman for whom this morning represents the culmination of 2 years of effort. The planning notices, the grant application, the special assessment, the contractor negotiations, the press releases, the social media campaign, the invitation calls to the commissioner's office, and the news affiliate. She is wearing a navy blazer that matches the banner color, which is either coincidence or planning, and Edward has enough experience with how Laura has managed this project to have no doubt which it is. By 9:30 a.m., 314 people are on the northern shoreline. The pavilion is decorated with bunting along the timber framing. The boat launch gleams in the late morning sun. The picnic tables are occupied by families who arrived early and have settled into the waterfront positions with the satisfied ease of people who feel they have discovered something they are entitled to enjoy. Children have been at the water's edge since the first families arrived. A group of them have waded into the shallows at the eastern end of the park, their voices carrying across the water with the particular bright clarity of children on a summer morning who have been told they are at a park and have taken the information at full value. The lake has dropped 14 inches by this point. The children at the water's edge are wading in water that is 14 inches shallower than it was when their parents drove in. Nobody has noticed yet. The drop is distributed across 19 acres of surface area, and the absolute change at any given point along the shore is real, but not yet dramatic enough to announce itself to a crowd of 300 people who arrived expecting a park opening and are experiencing one. Laura takes her position at the ribbon at 10:02 a.m. She gives her address, 3 minutes. She thanks the county. She thanks the contractor. She thanks the membership. She says the words, "This lake has always belonged to the community," which Michael has printed and dated and filed under the social media archive tab in the 4th inch of the binder sitting on Edward's porch table. She raises the ceremonial scissors at 10:06 a.m., and the crowd stirs forward in the way crowds stir toward the moment a ribbon cutting exists to produce. She cuts the ribbon at 10:07 a.m. The crowd applauds. Commissioner Klein shakes her hand for the camera. 2 board members embrace. The camera operator holds the ribbon-cutting shot and then begins to track the crowd spreading across the park. Families moving toward the picnic tables, the kayak family moving toward the boat launch, children running in all directions with the unstructured joy of an outdoor event on a warm morning. The camera operator notices the water at 10:14 a.m. She has been looking at the lake intermittently all morning. She notices now that the boat launch ramp, which she filmed at 8:45 a.m. as a clean concrete surface descending evenly into clear water, is descending into something less than clear water at its lower end. There is a visible mud line 2/3 of the way down the ramp, a horizontal boundary between wet concrete and exposed lake bed that was not there 90 minutes ago. She adjusts her angle toward the ramp and watches. The recession is visible in real time from this position. Not dramatic, not a wall of water retreating, but continuous and measurable, the water line pulling back from the ramp at a rate that a person watching steadily can perceive as movement. She holds a camera on it. At 10:16 a.m., the woman standing near the center of the northern shoreline looks down at her feet. She has been in the same spot for 12 minutes talking with a friend, her back partly to the water. She looks down because the ground near her shoes feels different than it did when she arrived, softer, wetter at the edge. She looks at the gap between her position and the water, 8 inches of pale exposed lake bed that was submerged when she walked to this spot. She says something to her friend. Her friend looks down. Then her friend looks at the water. The observation moves through the crowd in the pattern that all observations move through crowds. Person to person, attention following the direction of other people's attention, a spreading ring of awareness that begins at the waterline and works its way inward. People near the shore notice first. People further back notice when they see the people near the shore change their posture and orientation. Within 90 seconds of the first person looking down, 24 people are watching the waterline. At 10:18 a.m., 11 minutes after the ribbon cutting, the recession is beyond ambiguity. The waterline has pulled back from the full length of the northern shoreline. The pale exposed lake bed runs continuously from the eastern end of the park to the western boundary, a band 18 inches wide at its narrowest point, widening toward the outflow gradient at the southern end of the park area. The boat launch ramp is sitting on wet mud from its midpoint down. The kayak family is standing at the top of the ramp, looking at the exposed lower section with the particular stillness of people whose plan has been interrupted by something they cannot immediately explain. The 3 picnic tables at the eastern end of the walking trail have standing water moving toward their concrete footings from the redirected outflow pattern, exactly as illustrated in Exhibit B of DR. Whitaker's report, the color site map that shows precisely which tables flood first at full release gate position. The crowd has stopped moving. The conversations have stopped. 314 people are standing in various positions across a brand new lakeside park and watching the lake withdraw from it in full daylight, in the presence of a county commissioner and a news camera and oversized ceremonial scissors on the morning of its grand opening. The camera operator has been filming the recession for 4 minutes without interruption. She is not going to put the camera down. She has covered 11 years of local news and understands with the certainty of long professional instinct that she is currently filming the story rather than the setup for the story she came to tell. Commissioner Klein is standing near the pavilion entrance with his prepared remarks still in his hand. He is looking at the lake with the expression of a public official calculating in real time the distance between the event he was invited to and the event he is currently attending. Laura is at the pavilion steps. She is looking at the water with an expression that has traveled in the 11 minutes since she cut the ribbon across a distance that some people never have to travel in a single morning, from the apex of a 2-year project. From the warm applause and the commissioner's handshake and the news camera on her face to the specific vertiginous stillness of a person watching something she built with absolute public confidence begin to reveal, in front of everyone she invited, the foundation it was actually built on. At 10:31 a.m., a man in a gray jacket moves through the crowd from the access road entrance toward the northern shoreline. He walks with the focused, unhurried purpose of someone who knows exactly where he is going and has done this before. He reaches Laura at the pavilion steps at 10:33 a.m. He says her name. He confirms her identity. He places a manila envelope in her hand. Inside the envelope is the filed complaint, 47 pages plus 11 exhibits. The certified trespass survey from Jonathan Reed, DR. Whitaker's water rights assessment with its color site maps. Margaret's 7-page permit compliance analysis, 14 months of dated construction photographs, the grant application with its ownership misrepresentations to the county, every press release, the social media archive, the full text of the 1991 easement with Michael's legal analysis of every provision the HOA has violated. The news camera is still running. Commissioner Klein is 12 feet away. The crowd is watching. Laura reads the caption on the first page of the complaint. She reads the plaintiff's name. She reads her own name in the defendant caption. She reads the phrase direct trespass on fee simple property in the first paragraph of the complaint body. She looks up from the document. She looks at the lake, receding, pale lake bed widening, the boat launch sitting in mud. The crowd standing in the silence of 300 people who have come to a grand opening and are witnessing in 11 minutes the distance between what a document says and what someone decided it meant. She looks at the dam control house gate 300 yards to the south with its laminated sign visible in the morning light. Private property, Edward Harlan, owner. The camera operator holds the frame. She does not look away. The camera operator files her footage at 1:47 p.m. from the news van in the parking area above the northern shoreline, while the crowd is still dispersing and Laura Benson is still standing at the pavilion steps holding a 47-page complaint she has read twice through without moving. The operator has been doing local news for 11 years. She has filmed ribbon cuttings, groundbreakings, municipal ceremonies, county fair openings, school dedications, bridge unveilings, and every variety of public event that a regional affiliate covers in the course of a year. She has never filed footage like this. She calls her producer from a van before she drives back to the station, telling him to hold the 6 o'clock community interest slot open and expanded. What she has is not a 2-minute feel-good segment about a lakeside park. What she has is a 4-minute sequence that begins with a ribbon cutting and ends with a process server in a receding lake and a private property sign. And it is all on camera in continuous, unedited sequence. The producer tells her to come straight in. The segment airs at 6:04 p.m. on the regional ABC affiliate's evening broadcast. It runs 4 minutes and 20 seconds, longer than any community interest piece in the broadcast standard format, short enough to hold a general audience from opening frame to closing shot without losing the thread. It opens with the ribbon cutting. The editor has used the wide shot. Laura at the center of the frame, scissors raised, the crowd spread behind her, the pavilion in the background, and the lake silver and still beyond it. The moment looks exactly like what it was supposed to be: a community achievement, a public park, a summer morning filled with 300 people who came to celebrate something. The ribbon falls, the crowd applauds. Commissioner Klein shakes Laura's hand. The image is warm, civic, entirely unremarkable in the way of ribbon cuttings everywhere. The segment holds on that image for 4 seconds. Then it cuts to the water. The editor has used the sequence the camera operator captured from her elevated position near the pavilion's eastern corner. The steady, unbroken footage of the boat launch ramp as the waterline pulls back from it in visible, continuous recession. The cut from the ribbon-cutting applause to the silent, steady footage of water retreating from concrete is the kind of editorial decision that does not require explanation. The contrast makes the explanation itself. The next 90 seconds follow the crowd's attention as it turns toward the lake, the widening ring of people who stop talking and change their posture and look toward the water, the children at the shore noticing the gap between their feet and the water line. The camera tracking the recession the way you track something that is moving with purpose rather than accident. The boat launch ramp sitting in mud. The 3 eastern picnic tables with standing water at their footings. The full northern shoreline's pale, exposed lake bed running from one end of the park to the other. Then the process server. The camera operator had tracked him from the moment he came through the crowd. A man in a gray jacket moving with the contained, deliberate momentum of someone executing a task rather than attending an event. The footage shows his approach to Laura at the pavilion steps. It shows her receive the envelope. It shows her read the first page. It shows her face move through the distance between the expression she had been wearing since 10:02 a.m., the warm public confidence of a woman at the apex of a completed project, and the expression she is wearing now, which is not a single thing, but the absence of the previous thing, the particular stillness of a face from which certainty has just been removed. The segment closes on the laminated sign. The camera operator had filmed it on her way to the parking area, a 20-second clip of the dam control house gate with its single laminated notice centered at eye level, private property, Edward Harlan, owner. The sign is not dramatic. It is the kind of sign that private property owners put on gates across the lake country. Waterproof lamination, black text on white stock, functional rather than decorative. In the context of 4 minutes and 17 seconds of preceding footage, it is the most consequential 20 seconds of the segment. The news anchor reads the story over the closing shot in a measured, careful register of a broadcaster handling a story that is still developing and requires accuracy over emphasis. Willow Lake, she explains, is a privately owned lake. Its deed is held by a private citizen, Edward Harlan, who has owned the property, including the lake bed, the dam, and all associated water management rights, since 1998. The Crestwood HOA's construction of the Willow Lake Public Recreation Area was authorized by the HOA under a 1991 public access easement, a document which, according to a civil complaint filed in county court on Saturday morning, explicitly prohibits permanent construction of any kind within the easement area. The complaint further alleges that the HOA's concrete boat launch was constructed entirely outside the easement boundary on Mr. Harlan's fee simple property, where the association holds no rights of any description. The county has received a preliminary inquiry from the State Attorney General's office regarding the $45,000 county beautification grant awarded to the HOA for a project whose grant application described the lake as publicly owned. The segment ends. The broadcast moves to the next story. By 6:31 p.m., the segment has been clipped and posted to the affiliate's social media pages. By 8 p.m., it has been shared 1,400 times. By the time the story runs again at the 11 o'clock broadcast, unchanged, re-anchored with a brief update noting that the HOA had not responded to the affiliate's request for comment, the clip has been viewed by 87,000 people. By Sunday morning, the number is 340,000. By Monday afternoon, it crosses 500,000, carried by regional news aggregators and property rights discussion forums, and the particular social media velocity of story that has a clean visual narrative. Ribbon-cutting, reseeding lake. Private property sign that communicates its essential content without requiring the viewer to read a legal document to understand what happened. Edward watches the 6 o'clock broadcast from his kitchen. He watches it alone, with coffee, in the same chair he sat in 2 years ago on the Wednesday morning. He opened the planning notice at the kitchen table and called Michael. He watches the ribbon cutting. He watches the water reseed on the television screen the way he watched it reseed through binoculars from his porch 7 hours earlier. He watches Laura read the complaint caption. He watches the sign. He turns the television off when the segment ends and sits in the kitchen for a while. He is not triumphant. That is not the register he operates in. He is the thing that comes after a long preparation has executed correctly, settled, complete, at rest in the particular way of a man who identified a problem, assembled the appropriate response with appropriate patience, and is now watching the response work as designed. He finishes his coffee, washes the cup, and goes to bed. The commissioner's office issues a statement on Monday morning at 9:15 a.m. It is 4 sentences. The county is aware of the civil complaint filed against Crestwood HOA regarding the Willow Lake Recreation Area project. The county is requesting the return of the $45,000 beautification grant pending a full review of the representations made in the HOA's application regarding the ownership status of the lake and the legal basis for the development. The county takes the accuracy of grant applications seriously. No further comment at this time. Michael calls Edward at 9:45 a.m. to read him the statement. Edward listens. He asks if it is what Michael expected. Michael says it is exactly what he expected and slightly faster than he anticipated. The State Attorney General's office opens a formal inquiry by Tuesday afternoon, a letter addressed to the HOA board and to Laura Benson individually, notifying them that the office is reviewing the representations made in the $45,000 grant application to determine whether they constitute material misrepresentation to a government agency. The letter is 2 pages. Its second page lists the specific representations under review: the description of the lake as a public recreational asset, the characterization of the project as a public waterfront park on publicly accessible land, and the ownership status field in the grant application, which describes the property as held under a public access easement without disclosing that the underlying fee title belongs to a private individual. Laura retains a criminal defense attorney by Tuesday morning, before the Attorney General's letter arrives, which suggests that her own review of the grant application representations over the weekend produced conclusions consistent with what Michael had flagged 8 months earlier. The criminal defense attorney is not the same person as the HOA's land use counsel. He is a specialist. His retainer is a fact that the HOA board does not learn about until Wednesday evening, when it becomes relevant to understanding why Laura arrives at the emergency session with 2 attorneys rather than 1. The HOA board convenes at 7 p.m. Wednesday evening in the clubhouse conference room. 7 board members are present. 4 of them arrive having already spoken to personal attorneys about their individual exposure as board members who voted to approve a development project that a filed civil complaint, a county grant review, and a state attorney general's inquiry have collectively characterized as legally unauthorized, permit deficient, and potentially fraudulent in its public representations. Margaret is seated in the front row of the observer section when the board arrives. She has been there since 6:45 p.m. She is wearing the same composed, unhurried expression she wears when she is doing something professionally rather than emotionally. The expression of a woman who spent 24 years attending planning meetings and knows how to be present in a room without inserting herself into it. Her 7-page permit compliance assessment is resting on her knee in a manila folder. She does not open the folder. She does not need to. The folder is there for the same reason she is there, not to do anything, but to be seen. Laura arrives at 7:03 p.m. with her HOA land use counsel on her left and her newly retained criminal defense attorney on her right. The criminal defense attorney is a physical signal to the 4 board members with personal attorneys that the situation has expanded beyond a civil property dispute, and the signal lands correctly. 2 of those board members exchange a look across the conference table that communicates without words that the evening is going to be longer and more complicated than the agenda suggests. At 7:08 p.m., the board secretary announces that a courier delivery has arrived, addressed to her on behalf of the board. She opens the envelope. Inside is a 12-page document on Michael Grant's letterhead, a summary of the complaint's findings, organized for non-legal readers, with a cover note in Michael's handwriting. Mr. Edward Harlan is available for settlement discussion at any time the board is prepared to have one. He requests no further contact except through counsel. The board secretary distributes copies around the table. Laura does not take a copy. Her land use counsel takes one and begins reading it with the focused attention of someone encountering an opposing counsel's summary document for the first time and measuring it against what they already know. The board reads in silence. The silence goes on for several minutes. It is the silence of 7 people reading a document that describes in 12 measured pages the distance between what the HOA told the county it was building and what the certified survey, the water rights assessment, and the permit compliance analysis establish it actually built, and on what legal foundation and under whose authority, and at what cost to the property owner whose name appeared nowhere in 2 years of press releases and grant applications and social media posts about his own lake. Margaret sits in the front row and watches the board read. She does not say anything. She does not need to say anything. The folder on her knee, the document on the table, the 340,000 people who have watched a ribbon cutting and a reseeding lake and a private property sign on a phone screen since Saturday morning. They're saying everything that needs to be said. The board president, Laura, sets her copy of the summary down on the table when she reaches the last page. She looks at the cover note in Michael's handwriting. She reads it twice. The resolution does not come from a courtroom. It comes from 3 directions simultaneously: a state attorney general's formal inquiry, a civil complaint with 11 certified exhibits, and the sustained momentum of a story that 500,000 people watched on a phone screen across a single weekend, converging on Laura Benson and the Crestwood HOA board in the space of 6 weeks with a quiet, accumulated force of consequences that were set in motion the morning a planning notice arrived in Edward Harlan's mailbox 2 years earlier. Laura resigns on a Sunday morning 11 days after the grand opening. Her letter to the board secretary is 1 paragraph, sent by email at 8:44 a.m. It states that she is stepping down from the board presidency to focus on her personal legal situation and thanks the membership for the opportunity to serve. It does not explain which legal situation. It does not reference the civil complaint, the Attorney General's inquiry, the county grant review, or the criminal defense attorney she retained the previous Tuesday morning when her review of the grant application's ownership representations produced conclusions she was no longer able to argue against. It does not mention Edward Harlan, whose name she has not spoken publicly since the grand opening, and whose lake she described in 11 social media posts, 2 press releases, and 1 government grant application as belonging to the community. She sends the letter and stops answering her phone. The Attorney General's formal findings arrive 3 weeks later, addressed to the HOA board president, a designation that now belongs to Gerald Tate, who assumed the interim presidency the morning after Laura's email and has spent the intervening weeks reading every document in a legal file with the methodical attention of a man who spent 30 years as a municipal attorney and knows that the only way to understand a situation like this one is to read the primary sources rather than summaries of them. Gerald reads the 1991 easement. He reads Michael's complaint. He reads Jonathan Reed's certified plat with its boundary notation marking the boat launch position as direct trespass on fee simple property. He reads Margaret's permit assessment with its finding that 7 categories of required permits were absent from a $340,000 construction project. He reads Dr. Whitaker's water rights analysis and its confirmation that Edwards Gate Operation Authority is absolute, detached, and legally unassailable. He reads every press release Laura issued. He reads the grant application. He reads the ownership status field in the grant application where Laura wrote, public recreational easement administered by Crestwood HOA, and did not write the name of the man who has held the deed to the lake bed since 1998. Gerald sets the documents down and calls Michael Grant's office the following morning. He identifies himself. He explains his role. He tells Michael that the board is not here to contest the survey or the easement analysis, and that the board's purpose in requesting a settlement conference is to fix what was done incorrectly and ensure it cannot happen the same way again. Michael calls Edward within the hour. Edward listens to the summary. He asks if Michael trusts Gerald's stated position. Michael tells him the position is consistent with everything Gerald has said and everything Gerald's background suggests he would say, a retired municipal attorney who joined a community board because he believed in governance done correctly and found himself inheriting the consequences of governance done incorrectly does not come to a settlement conference looking for the minimum concession. He comes looking for the correct resolution. Edward walks to the dam control house that afternoon and raises the lake back to normal level before the conference is even scheduled. He turns the primary spillway from full release to standard summer management position and stands in the control house listening to the gate close and the discharge settle back into its seasonal pattern. He walks the gravel path back to the house and watches the lake from the porch through the afternoon light. Over the next 2 days, Willow Lake rises back to its summer level, quietly, incrementally, without ceremony. The boat launch ramp meets the water at the grade its contractor designed it to meet. The pavilion sits dry on the northern shoreline. The picnic tables stand in their rows along the waterfront, as if the past 11 days had not occurred, which is the particular quality of built things. They outlast the circumstances of their construction and wait, patient and without opinion, for someone to decide what they mean now. The settlement conference convenes 3 weeks after Gerald's call. Michael arrives with the 4-inch binder and sets it on the conference table in front of him. He does not open it once across 3 days of negotiation. He does not need to. Everyone in the room has read everything inside it. Gerald Tate arrives with his land use counsel and the stated intention to resolve rather than contest, and he holds to both through 3 days of detailed negotiation with the consistency of a man who decided his approach before entering the room. Margaret attends as a technical witness on the permit compliance track, present and prepared her 7-page assessment in a folder on the table in front of her. The county sends a representative named Patricia's son, whose mandate is the return of the $45,000 and the establishment of a process that prevents a grant application from describing a privately owned lake as a public recreational asset. The settlement takes 3 days in outline and 10 more to reduce to a signed document. Its terms are 4 in number and comprehensive in scope. The first establishes recorded boundary clarification, a formal instrument filed permanently with the county recorder, mapping the precise boundary of the 1991 easement against Edwards' fee simple property lines, available in the public record alongside every other document in his chain of title, so that no future board president can mistake administrative custody of an easement memo for development authority over a private lake. The second addresses the boat launch ramp, the one structure that sits not within the easement area, but entirely outside it on Edwards' fee simple land, where the HOA holds no right of any description. The ramp will be removed, the concrete broken out, the lake bed restored to pre-construction condition, the shoreline margin revegetate to match the surrounding bank. The HOA bears the full cost. Jonathan Reed will supervise the restoration against his certified plat as the standard. The third addresses the remaining park infrastructure, pavilion, trail, picnic tables, which sit within the easement geography but in violation of the easement's explicit construction prohibition. Their removal would eliminate a facility the broader community has a genuine interest in using and would serve no restorative purpose beyond the legal principle. The settlement converts them instead into a legitimately easement-compliant recreational facility, operated under a revised access agreement between the HOA and Edward that accurately reflects the 1991 document's terms, requires his advance written consent for any future infrastructure addition, and establishes an annual notification confirming no new construction has occurred within the easement area without that consent. The fourth addresses the county. Return of the $45,000 grant with applicable interest within 30 days, full cooperation with the Attorney General's inquiry, and a public correction notice to the Commissioner's office and the regional ABC affiliate clarifying the ownership status of Willow Lake and the correct legal characterization of the easement under which the recreation area now legitimately operates. Edward signs the agreement on a Thursday afternoon. He reads every term before he signs, the way he reads every document that is going to matter. He caps his pen. He shakes Michael's hand. He shakes Gerald Tate's hand across the table, because Gerald came in good faith and held to it, and that is worth acknowledging regardless of what made the conference necessary. He drives home, makes coffee, and walks the gravel path to the dam control house one final time that evening. Not to operate anything, not to document anything. The logbook entry for today is already written. Conference concluded, settlement executed, terms recorded. There is nothing left to note. He stands at the southern end of his lake in the long summer evening light, the low gold angle that arrives in the lake country in late July, when the afternoons are at their fullest. The lake sits below the dam the way it has always sat, flat at the center, catching the light at the edges, moving with the small wind through the western tree line in the unhurried way of water that has been in this valley longer than any of the documents that describe it. The northern shoreline is visible across the water. The pavilion roof, the walking trail's timber rail, the picnic tables in their rows, everything Laura built standing in the evening light. Now operating under a revised agreement that answers the question of whose lake this is with the permanence of a recorded instrument rather than the temporary authority of a grant application nobody reviewed carefully enough. Edward stands there for a while in the quiet, 2 years from the planning notice to the signed settlement, 14 months of photographing construction from the porch without a word to anyone who did not need to know, one morning of unlocking the control house at 6:02 a.m. and turning a valve that had been waiting 19 years for this particular use. 11 minutes between the ribbon cutting and the moment the water made the explanation that no letter, no injunction, and no cease and desist could have made as completely or as publicly or as permanently. He had never raised his voice. He had never sent a single letter to Laura Benson. He had never attended a community meeting, never called the commissioner's office, never spoken to the news crew, never confronted anyone in any forum across 2 years of watching a public park rise on his private shoreline, while press releases described his lake as a gift the community was giving itself. He had opened the gates. Michael had built the case. Margaret had documented the permits. Jonathan Reed had measured the boundary. Dr. Whitaker had mapped the water. And the lake had done what the lake does. It had receded, it had revealed, it had returned. It is doing it still, sitting in the evening light the way it sat before any of this began, before the planning notice and the special assessment and the social media campaign and the navy and white banner and the ceremonial scissors and the 314 people who came to a grand opening and witnessed in 11 minutes the distance between what a document says and what someone decided it meant. Edward turns from the lake and walks back up the gravel path toward the house. Behind him, Willow Lake holds the last of the evening light. What do you think about this story? Share your thoughts in the comments below, especially on themes of injustice and how far someone should go to protect their rights. Does it ever cross into something darker, like a form of quiet aggression? Take a stand and let me know your perspective.